Hi, welcome to Sustain Talks, the podcast crafted to enlighten individuals and businesses on the path to becoming more sustainable and socially responsible. I'm Sam Candy, CEO of Responsible Futures, and today I'm excited to be talking with Tash Morgan-Etty. Tash is the founder of Right Rabbit, a freelance sustainability comms strategist and writer. After following each other for a while and finding ourselves in the same webinars and events, we finally got round to having a conversation. And when I did, I couldn't wait to get Tash on this podcast and share her insight with you. Tash, it's so good to have you here. How are you?
It's good to be here, and thank you for having me.
It's great. I can't wait to share for you to share the background about you, how you got to where you are now and what you do now. Please do.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a convoluted journey, really. So I grew up in Southern Africa and was very lucky to have quite a strong influence from my family in terms of being really interested in people and
Yeah.
being really interested in the planet. So I come from a long line of teachers and nurses, so I was very interested in people care and how people, around their health and education. And then we spent quite a lot of time in the African bushveld. So from a very young age, I was having encounters with quite big wildlife, leopards and hippo and things like that, and really wanted to work for Nat Geo. That was the dream. Ended up getting into TV production, starting off making name badges and cups of tea, and worked my way up to being a producer. Worked on some big productions, live broadcasts, broadcasting to 42 African countries live. So that was intense and I absolutely loved it. And then did some journalism work, including eco-journalism in Mozambique and up in Ethiopia as well. Then moved over to Ghana, West Africa, and did corporate comms work there and marketing work. And then survived Ebola in West Africa to move to the UK for COVID.
What a journey. It's really been a huge journey. And that's
Yeah,
what brings you to today and what you do today.
exactly. So I have always loved writing. It's followed me through my career in various different forms, from script writing to press releases to, internal newsletters, all sorts of things. And so when I knew that we were moving to the UK, I thought, oh, great, I can finally, niche down and focus on copywriting. And as soon as I launched my business, I was approached by a sustainability consultant, and he asked if I would put a content plan together for him in exchange for him essentially greening my business. Um, I didn't think it needed greening because it was it was me and my laptop, and so I didn't think my footprint could be very big. But he proved me wrong. And showed me all kinds of ways that I could particularly reduce my digital footprint, which is fascinating. And then his final question to me was, well, you live in a very sustainable way. You are obviously very interested in sustainability in your private life and your hobbies. Why don't you apply that to your work? Why don't you work with sustainable businesses and support what they're doing? Um, and I didn't have an answer for him. And it bugged the hell out of me. I think I had about 3 sleepless nights where I just thought, there's no good reason for me not to. And I pivoted the business within a week and decided that was it. I was going to focus on purpose-led businesses and sustainable businesses.
Yeah, it's that click moment, isn't it? When just something changes and you're like, actually, I could do this. And it's putting purpose with what exactly what you do. I
Exactly.
I think that's interesting, and a lot of businesses are facing that themselves at the moment. Do you think there are challenges to businesses when trying to communicate their sustainability efforts, and how can they overcome these challenges?
There definitely are, especially in the current legislative environment.
Mm.
So the obvious ones are greenwashing and green hashing. But I think prior to even getting to a point where you're worrying about those, I think actually the biggest challenge is internal comms. So I think what a lot of businesses fail to do is to bring their people on board first, so that they understand why they're having to, have all these extra KPIs around sustainability.
Mm.
And then also they understand why the products are evolving, why the services are evolving around the sustainability legislation, what their role is in that. And actually, the companies that successfully implement sustainability comms internally first usually find that their teams become their biggest advocates.
Mm.
And they're shouting it from the rooftops before, the organizations even kind of got their heads around how to do it. And I think it just helps to move everything forward so much more smoothly.
Mm. Yeah, I can relate to that so much. So we did training, go into companies and train their teams on sustainability, and some did really amazingly well, and others I've seen, I asked them what sort of things they're doing within their business, or does anybody know what their net zero target is, or if they have one, and often they don't. But the ones that do, you can see them talking about it all the time. But if they don't, then, well, what was the point of doing it if their employees aren't sharing that with their stakeholders as well? So I think that's a really good point. You mentioned greenwashing, green hushing. We're seeing so much of that about at the moment. Some new laws are out there. Can you explain a little bit more, in your view, about the concepts of that?
Yeah, so just to keep it really simple, green washing is overstating sustainability commitments or achievements. Green hushing is understating them. And they're dangerous kind of in equal measure, really. So the way that they happen is actually, when it comes to greenwashing, people assume initially that it's really insidious and that it's done on purpose, and people are trying to deceive their consumers and all that kind of thing. That does happen sometimes, but actually the majority of greenwashing comes from an unintentional slip up, effectively, where there just isn't enough data to back up the claim, or the comms team doesn't fully understand the ramifications of the sustainability action, and they communicate it in a way that's kind of, well, overstating it. It's blowing it out of proportion in
Yeah.
some way.
I still think that we're seeing it so much, even though there's laws coming up about it. Do you have any examples of where you have seen greenwashing in various industries, and how can people identify when they're seeing it?
Yeah, so a kind of textbook one, I suppose, is Shell's ad that was banned last year, where they were talking about all the clean energy infrastructure that they're investing in, and beautiful campaign, beautifully shot, all of that jazz. But the thing is that ultimately a very, very small proportion of all of their capital is going that way. The majority is still in oil and gas. So that was pulled very hurriedly. That ad, the whole campaign was banned. But in general, I mean, that's a blatant one that's pretty easy to spot. For the average consumer, I think the easiest way to see it is, and this is disappearing, but we do see some of it, is these sort of self-generated stamps on products that say natural or organic or sustainable. So it's like a label, Another area you can look for it is in the copy, which is the text on products, where they'll say things like better for your wallet and better for the planet, you know. And things like good for your body, good for the earth, you know.
Yeah.
But there's no substantiation. There's no kind of little, you know, small print asterisks pointing you to a website with more info. There's just nothing to back it up. Then there's also images. That's another form of greenwashing that people don't usually think about. But where you have a bottle that looks like it's covered in craft paper, brown craft paper, but actually it's a plastic wrap bottle, and there's absolutely no credentials on there at all in terms of, you know, what they've done around sustainability.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy.
those are dead giveaways.
It's crazy when you think that, you know, it's like we went through a phase where everyone jumped on the sustainability wagon and they just want it right. We're just going to say that we're sustainable. We'll work out how we are at a later point. And now that certain regulations are coming in, it's making it much more difficult to do that. So let's talk a little bit about the regulations. How do they play in combating greenwashing? And I mentioned the new law in the EU. Maybe you want to explain a little bit about that for the listeners. And do you think we'll follow suit in the UK too?
Yeah, so in the EU, there's the Green Claims Directive. We actually have something quite similar in the UK already, which is the Green Claims Code. The directive is likely to go a bit further than the code, but it's not being ratified in EU law just yet. So there may still be changes. It's not totally clear on what it's going to look like when it's ultimately ready. But as far as the Green Claims Code in the UK is concerned, there's already been it's been implemented, and there have been ads that have been pulled, even from organizations that are really trying their best. For example, Oatly,
Yeah.
they had their ad pulled. And what's great about Oatly is they put their hands up and said, you know, look, we made a mistake, and we should have done better, and we will do better. And
Yeah.
that's what we want to see, you know, at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Yeah, I think the same. And you know, I saw a campaign with Innocent Drinks who had the same situation, and it's such a shame because when you look behind at what they actually do, they do so much. And if it's a case of getting one word wrong, and we've all made those mistakes. I remember saying something about making an event sustainable, and I missed out the word more sustainable, and it got so much response from people saying, oh, hang on, it's not sustainable. And I think that people just have to be careful with every single little word and making sure that they're substantiating those claims. When it comes to communicating sustainability, what do you think the key principles that businesses should keep in mind, especially to help them not to green hush?
Yeah, so I think once you've kind of been through the whole process, the creative process, getting you know, eyes on the creative prior to production, and then you know, when it's been edited and it's prior to broadcast or publication, sorry, you know, get more eyes on it, get people to review it, get them to double check it and triple check it for you. But going back to kind of even the conceptualization and ideation stage of the creative, I think what's missing in a lot of the cases, so people are kind of already freaking out about the greenwashing before they start thinking about the creative. And I think we actually need to take a step back and go back to kind of old school methods, really, of thinking about communication, which is being empathetic, being human. You know, just simply stopping and making the effort to listen to your audience. What's important to them? What are they concerned about? What are they worried about? And once you understand that, it's so much easier to then link your sustainability efforts to what's relevant for them. And if you've actually done your homework and you've done a double materiality assessment, actually that's all built into your ESG strategy already. So you would have engaged with stakeholders, you would have listened to stakeholders to find out, what really is the most, well, what are their top priorities, and how does that relate to your business?
Yeah.
So if that comes all the way down then to your comms team, they understand it, they can integrate that into the creative, into the messaging, and it will land with your audience because you've connected that whole circle.
Yeah, I think that's why in companies it's so important that everybody within the company is educated on sustainability. Certainly you might find that companies start with the client-facing people, so the sales teams, because they're having conversations about sustainability day in and day out. But when you sort of look at other departments, marketing, comms, we're seeing so many content writers coming forward for companies, and they're being left to come up with that communication without necessarily the training, education, and insight behind it. How do you think that content writers can integrate sustainability into their writing, but without it being forced insincere? How can they make it authentic?
So I'm going to use the swears, so excuse the language.
Over it.
But basically, I would say don't be a dick. What I mean by that is don't talk down to your audience.
Yeah.
Right? Don't underestimate their intelligence, and also don't underestimate their empathy for what's happening in the world around them. They watch the news, they watch the weather forecast, they see the weather outside their door, they experience it. People know what's happening, and they are scared. I mean, all the stats are showing, that climate anxiety is growing. In 2023, the children's word of the year was climate change.
Wow, I never knew that.
So that was the Oxford University Press did a survey, and that was the number one word besides war. So even kids are aware of it. So whether you're marketing to adults, you're marketing to kids, I think, if you're selling them a washing powder that has 10% natural ingredients, how is that relevant to what's happening in the world? How is that relevant to what they're worrying about? So I think be really careful about being condescending, and really get to know your audience and also what their hopes and dreams are. They want a better future, particularly adults kind of who might have children. They're very concerned about their children and those and the future of their family. So speak to that, in an authentic way. Selling them a 10% natural washing powder, I don't know that that's going to hold water for much longer.
No, I totally agree. What about storytelling? I love it when I see beautiful stories or hear beautiful stories, and I'm always surprised when companies don't share those stories. They how do you think people can bring to life storytelling? And have you got any examples where you've seen it done really well?
Yeah, absolutely. So storytelling is the oldest form of communication, right? In human history. So we have an innate kind of function deep in our brain that automatically wakes up to storytelling, which makes it the perfect tool for sustainability comms. Oh gosh, there's so many ways to use it. Some great it's a perfect way to tap into that empathy with the audience, and also make sure that you're touching on that representation piece. So are they seeing themselves in the story? Are they properly represented in terms of diversity as well? And then also, I think there's so many different narratives you can include as well. So there's humor.
Yeah.
A brilliant brand that uses this is Who Gives a Crap.
I love that. Yeah.
So,
I know
so
exactly who you're talking about.
yeah, so their latest campaign is genius. It's Bums of the World, Uncrap the World. I mean, it's just absolutely fantastic. I love that one. Romance is another fantastic, storytelling tool. There's Trainline did a collabo with Craig David. And he created a song for them, and they also created the most beautiful animated video. And that's called I Came by Train. That's really worth looking up. And then there's the classic hero narrative where you're putting the consumer or the citizen in the center of the campaign, and you're enabling them to be part of your sustainability journey. So I think that's always a winner. And a brand that's done that really successfully is The Body Shop.
Yeah.
So they've worked with Tetra Pak on a in-store recycling scheme. So people can take their bottles back to the store where they bought it from, or just their local store for recycling.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. And I do, whenever I see someone storytelling, I've just recently switched a supplier to my event registrations to Ticket Tailor. And when I saw they're a B Corp, and the second I saw that, I was like, okay, they're the one for me. Then when I started seeing their storytelling of what they're doing and their social value, it just drew me so much closer to them. And I knew that I'd made the right choice by working with them. So I think that storytelling, it's just so beautiful when you see it out there.
It's really great. It's engaging for audiences, but I think comms teams, sometimes the focus is always external.
Yeah.
And I think some of that storytelling could be used beautifully internally in terms of employee engagement, in terms of retention, and then also getting new talent on board as well.
Yeah. You mentioned a few different brands there, but do you have a favorite sustainability or sustainable brand?
I do. I've got one that just, I have to stop myself talking about it actually. And that's faith in nature.
Right.
So I think what appeals to me is, it's not all talk, it's definitely action with them. They were the first company in the world to officially legally appoint nature as a director of the business.
Wow.
And that just says everything. They say, nature is the boss, so we have to give nature a voice in our business. So they have a legal representative, who will present data or, whatever's relevant to the decision that's being made on behalf of nature.
That's beautiful. Are there any brands that you think are really getting it wrong, apart from Shell?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think there's loads. But I think kind of ones that people don't usually think about, particularly in terms of B2B businesses, are the consultancy businesses. So, they have kind of said, oh, we're the middleman, we're representing clients, or we're talking to clients, we're not the big polluters. So you have the big four, but then there's also creative agencies as well. Havas Media is one that's kind of been in the news recently. And I think so these kind of consultancy agency type businesses, I think, need to start making a better effort in terms of the clients they choose to serve. And then also in terms of their scope 3 and their suppliers and what they're doing internally.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot in finance as well. So, we're a really large company and they're shouting about how sustainable are, and then they're banking and investing with, for example, Barclays, who are one of the biggest investors in fossil fuel. And it just doesn't balance it out. But what's really great is right now is they're getting found out, and people are calling out. And I think a few years ago we'd never mention these brands, we'd never call them out, and actually that call out trend has really become, and that's why people have to be so much more careful about what they're saying, how they're saying it. Yeah, but so just the final question now, what future trends do you see in the intersection of sustainability, content writing and storytelling?
I think there's a few, but most important is kind of the good news and the bad news. So let's go with the bad news first. I think there's going to be more of this calling up. There's going to be more audiences saying, more consumers, not even kind of people in the know. I would say there's going to be more consumers saying that doesn't sound right, that doesn't add up, and they're going to do their own homework and they're going to start calling businesses out more and more. And for those who don't call businesses out, not everyone's up for that. I think they will actually simply ignore messaging and marketing and communications from brands that don't align with their values or that are not authentic. They'll just kind of blinker them off to one point, and those brands are just going to eventually become irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that's the bad news. The good news is I think smart businesses are going to invest in clever creatives who create written and visual content with this principle of a concept of a positive brain print. So this goes beyond responsible communication of sustainability or authentic communication of sustainability. And it's actually creating messaging and creating communications that influence positive behavior change. So it's showing a world that we want to achieve and bringing people on board to achieve that, and illustrating to them the simple changes they can make to move all of us in that direction. And it becomes far more easily digestible than kind of, you have the carrot and the stick idea. Let's show people the carrot and stop kind of, blaming the consumer for there being, so much plastic pollution, for example.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've learned so much through this conversation, even though we had a very similar conversation when we first spoke, and yet again I'm just like, one tip, there's another tip, and things that I can use in my small business as well. So I really appreciate your time. I know that so many people are going to get so much out of this conversation, and that's what I'm trying to do, is just help people and educate them, because I want people to be more sustainable and socially responsible and not worry about putting content out there. And you've really helped people to do that, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Really good.
Absolute pleasure. I think the biggest thing is that it doesn't have to be a headache.
No.
We can make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're worried about it, reach out to people like you, Tash.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for your time. Have a really lovely day.
And you too.
All right.
Thanks.